I didn't cry when my cousin called me the family charity case. I didn't flinch when he laughed and said it loud enough for the whole rooftop restaurant to hear. What hurt wasn't the joke. What hurt was how comfortable everyone was laughing along. It was my engagement party, not his, mine. Soft lights, city skyline glowing behind us, glasses clinking, people I hadn't seen in years hugging me like we were close. The kind of night that's supposed to feel safe, celebratory, locked in amber. Instead, it turned into a stage. He stood up without warning, tapping his spoon against a champagne glass like he owned the moment. My fiancé squeezed my hand under the table, confused but smiling, assuming this was about to be a sweet toast. It wasn't. Since we're all here, my cousin Aaron said, dragging out my name like a punchline, let's appreciate Maya. 30 years old, still finding herself. Still freelancing. Still figuring it out. A pause. Perfectly timed. Honestly, he added, grinning, she's proof you don't need a job if your parents keep the lights on. The laughter came fast. Too fast. The kind that tells you people were waiting for permission. Someone near the bar whistled. Another voice chimed in. Must be nice. A woman I barely knew leaned toward her friend and whispered, I thought she worked in something creative? Aaron lifted his glass toward me. To Maya. Our free spirit. Free spirit. That word people use when they mean failure but don't want to sound cruel. I felt every eye slide toward me, measuring, confirming. What none of them knew was that the startup Aaron had bragged about joining last year. I'd signed off on their funding round. I was the invisible name in the documents they skimmed past. But in that moment, I let myself look small. I raised my glass back at him. Cheers, I said softly. And the room relaxed. Because nothing makes people more comfortable than someone accepting their place beneath them. Aaron sat down like he'd done me a favor. My aunt leaned over and patted my arm. You're such a good sport, she whispered. Not everyone finds their path right away. I nodded. The truth was I'd found my path years ago. I just learned very early not to announce it. In my family, success was only real if it looked loud. Suits, offices, titles you could drop at dinner. Aaron had always understood that. He knew how to sell himself, how to turn potential into applause. I was the opposite. Quiet, observant, useful. Growing up, Aaron was the one adults asked about. Teachers predicted big futures for him. Coaches slapped his back and told him leadership ran in his blood. I was the one who helped, edited his presentations, fixed his spreadsheets, stayed up late rewriting his cover letters while he slept. When he landed his first real job, he thanked our uncle. When I landed my first client, my mother asked when I'd apply somewhere stable. So I stopped explaining. I learned how to build things without inviting commentary. Learned how to subject line, incident report, immediate review required. I didn't open it yet. Aaron leaned across the table toward my fiancé. So man, he said, you ready to be the sole provider? More laughter. Softer this time. Familiar. I caught my reflection in the glass wall behind him. Calm. Composed. Almost serene. The kind of woman people mistake for harmless. Inside, something settled into place. Because humiliation only works if you believe it. And I didn't. The email buzzed again. A follow-up. Urgent. I excused myself, murmuring something about needing air, and stepped away from the table. The city hummed below the rooftop, alive and indifferent. I finally opened the message. It was from HR. From my HR department. A formal complaint. Anonymous. Time-stamped earlier that evening. It described a senior manager who regularly mocked junior staff, used family connections to intimidate colleagues, and openly bragged that leadership would never touch him. The initials at the bottom were unmistakable. C. Harper Cole. I leaned against the railing, the noise of the party muffled behind me, and read the final line. If nothing changes, I'm leaving. And I won't be the only one. Behind me, through the glass, I could see Aaron laughing again. Arms slung around someone's shoulder. Perfectly at home in a room that believed his version of reality. 4 years I'd stayed quiet to keep the peace. To protect family. To avoid becoming the problem. But standing there, phone warm in my hand, I realized something with startling clarity. Staying silent wasn't neutral anymore. It was permission. I finished my drink, straightened my shoulders, and took one last look at the room that thought it knew me. They believed the story where I was drifting. For now. Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't correcting the joke. It's deciding when to end it. People think humiliation begins in public. Doesn't. It begins quietly years earlier, in the way people talk about you when you're not in the room. In the way expectations get assigned like permanent labels and no one ever checks if they still fit. In my family, those labels were decided early. Aaron was the ambitious one. I was the creative one. That sounds harmless until you grow up and realize one of those is treated like a compliment, and the other like a phase you're supposed to outgrow. When we were kids, Aaron took up space. Loud opinions. Big plans. Teachers loved him because he looked confident even when he didn't know the answer. Adults nodded when he spoke, impressed by the certainty in his voice. I learned to wait. I learned that if I wanted to be heard, I had to be right. Not confident. Not loud. Right. At family dinners, Aaron talked about what he was going to be. A founder. A leader. Everyone smiled and told him he had the mindset. When I talked about ideas, systems, designs, how things could work better, my mother would tilt her head and say, "That's nice, Maya. But what's the real plan?" The real plan. As if curiosity was a placeholder, not a direction. The first time Aaron took credit for Aaron stood on stage and presented my work like it had poured fully formed out of his mouth. The judges praised his clarity, his creativity, his vision. When they handed him first place, he scanned the crowd, saw me, and smiled. That smile said thank you. It also said, this is how it works. On the drive home, my aunt told him he was going places. My mom asked me to pass the salt. I didn't say anything. I told myself it didn't matter. That recognition was overrated. That I didn't need applause to know what I'd done. But something small and sharp lodged itself in my chest that day. Over time it grew. In college, Aaron switched majors 3 times. Every time my family framed it as exploration. When I changed my focus once, my dad asked if I was getting distracted. Aaron interned places because he knew how to talk. I worked 3 part-time jobs and freelanced at night, teaching myself skills no one around me understood well enough to value. When I landed my first real contract, I was so proud I printed the email and showed it to my mom. She skimmed it and said, "That's great, but is it steady?" Steady, safe, normal. Words that always seemed to orbit me like warnings. So I stopped sharing. I learned to shrink my wins down to something digestible. Just a small project. Nothing big. I'm helping out. It made family gatherings easier. No awkward comparisons. No raised eyebrows. No one asking why Aaron, with all his confidence, was still struggling to land something permanent while I quietly paid my own rent. Letting them believe I was behind protected their idea of him. And maybe part of me thought it protected me too. The truth is, I didn't want their approval as much as I feared their interference. I'd seen what happened when I rented a desk in a shared space that smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. I took calls in hallways. I reinvested everything. I learned how to read contracts, how to negotiate without sounding apologetic, how to say no without over-explaining. And I learned something else. People treat you differently when they think you need them. So I stopped letting them think that. Aaron never noticed. Or maybe he did, and it didn't fit the story he'd memorized. To him, I was still the same girl. The helper. The backup. The one who would always be there to smooth things over. When he complained about coworkers, I listened. When he jumped between jobs, I reassured him. When he talked about leadership, I nodded. He never asked what I was working on. Because in his mind, if it mattered, he would have heard about it. That's the thing about underestimating people. You stop looking closely. By the time my company started making real money, I was already practiced at invisibility. I knew how to sit at tables and let people assume I was junior. I knew how to ask questions that revealed everything without revealing myself. It wasn't a strategy at first. It was survival. I didn't want to become the subject of family debates. I didn't want to be compared. I didn't want Aaron's success or lack of it measured against mine like a scoreboard. So I kept my head down and my mouth shut. At least I thought I did. Looking back, there were signs. Aaron's jokes about my freelance phase sharpened. His advice became patronizing. His stories painted me as a cautionary tale. "You don't want to end up like Maya," he once told a cousin. He believed I would never contradict the version of me that made him feel taller. By the time we were adults, the roles felt fixed. He was the one with potential. I was the one with excuses. And I let it stand, because I'd built something fragile and precious, and I didn't want his hands on it. I didn't want my family's opinions shaping it. I didn't want to fight battles I didn't need to fight yet. What I didn't realize was that every time I swallowed a comment, every time I let a joke slide, every time I accepted being underestimated to keep the peace, I was teaching him something too. I was teaching him there were no consequences. So when he raised that glass at my engagement party and called me jobless, he wasn't being bold. He was being consistent. Consistent with a story we'd all allowed to exist. The difference was, this time the story had wandered into a room full of people whose livelihoods were connected to me. And I was done letting my past decide how much disrespect I was willing to tolerate in the present. What Aaron didn't understand, what no one laughing that night understood, was that silence isn't the same as submission. Sometimes it's just patience. And patience, when it runs out, doesn't explode. It recalculates. That I didn't confront Aaron right away. People expect revenge to be loud, explosive, immediate. But real control doesn't rush. It watches. After the engagement party, life returned to its familiar rhythm on the surface. Family group chats buzzed with photos and jokes. My aunt posted about how proud she was of all the successful kids. Aaron liked the post within seconds. Of course he did. At work, things were quieter but sharper. The anonymous complaint wasn't alone anymore. Within a week, 3 more came in. Different departments, different writing styles. Same pattern, same initials hidden between the lines. I read every word. I learned how Aaron spoke to interns when no one senior was around. How he joked about people's accents, their salaries, their replaceability. How he liked to remind them that his uncle sat on the board, that his last name meant protection. What surprised me wasn't the cruelty. It was the confidence. He truly believed the system existed for him, and maybe once it had. I remembered us as kids sitting at the dining table while the adults argued about money. Aaron would lean over and whisper, "Relax, we're fine. People like us always land on our feet. People like us." Even back then, I knew we meant different things. I started attending meetings I previously delegated. Not dramatically, just present, listening more than speaking. Watching who leaned forward when certain names were mentioned, who avoided eye contact. Power always leaves fingerprints. One afternoon, I joined a review call with Aaron's division. Cameras on. Polite smiles. He didn't realize I'd be there until halfway through, when someone said my name. There it was. That flicker. Surprise first. Then recovery. Then charm. "Maya." "Wow," he said, laughing. "Didn't know you were sitting in on this one." "I try to stay informed," I replied evenly. He nodded. He talked about growth but not retention, about innovation but not execution, about leadership but never about people. When questions came, he deflected smoothly. When someone pushed back, he smiled wider. I said nothing. Not yet. After the call, my assistant messaged me privately. "You looked nervous when you joined." I stared at the screen for a moment. Good. That evening, I visited my mother. She was chopping vegetables when I walked in, moving fast, like she always did when she wanted to avoid conversation. We talked about wedding plans, guest lists, seating arrangements. Then she sighed. "Aaron told me something strange today," she said casually. I didn't look up. "Oh." "He said you've been acting distant, cold at work, like you're trying to prove something." I smiled faintly. "And?" She hesitated. "He worries you're taking things personally. You know how sensitive you are." Sensitive. The word slid between us like a well-worn blade. I turned to face her. "Mom, do you think Aaron respects me?" She froze. The knife paused mid-air. "That's not fair," she said finally. "He's family." That wasn't my question. She set the knife down. "You always do this," she murmured. "You look for meaning where there is none." I leaned against the counter, suddenly tired. Or maybe I see meaning where everyone else learned to ignore it. She didn't answer. Because deep down she knew. At night, alone in bed, funny indeed. I didn't respond. Friday morning, the room felt different. He was already there when I walked in, standing too straight, talking too loudly, performing confidence instead of inhabiting it. As people took their seats, the chair nodded to me. Maya, we'll start with your overview. I stood. I didn't rush. I spoke about culture, about retention metrics, about exit interviews that had been quietly ignored. I didn't name Aaron. I didn't need to. Data is patient. It tells the truth without emotion. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then it was Aaron's turn. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and began. Only this time his usual rhythm faltered. He stumbled over numbers, flipped past slides too quickly, missed questions. When one board member asked directly about turnover in his department, he laughed. People leave everywhere, he said lightly. That's just the market. Another voice cut in. Calm, firm, not at that rate. I watched his jaw tighten. For the first time, Aaron wasn't the one controlling the narrative. After the meeting, he caught up to me in the hallway. What the hell was that? He hissed, the charm gone. I met his eyes. Steady, unafraid. That, I said softly, was information. He scoffed. You think you're smarter than me now? I tilted my head. I think I always was. The words landed harder than I expected. His face flushed. You've always been jealous, he snapped. Always trying to prove something. I smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just truthfully. No, I said. I stopped trying to prove anything a long time ago. I walked away because the most dangerous moment for someone who's always been protected is when they realize the protection isn't automatic anymore. And Aaron had just realized he was standing alone. Aaron didn't come for me directly. That would have required courage. Instead, he went after the space around me. It started small. Meetings I was suddenly left out of. Emails where my name appeared only in CC like an afterthought. Decisions made urgently before I could weigh in. The kind of moves that look harmless on paper but feel deliberate when they stack. I noticed. Of course I did. But what unsettled me wasn't the behavior. It was how familiar it felt. This was his oldest trick. If he couldn't dominate the conversation, he'd change the room. If he couldn't control the person, he'd isolate them. I'd watched him do it our entire lives. At family gatherings, he'd pull people aside before I arrived, planting quiet ideas. Maya's under a lot of stress. She takes things too personally. You know how she is. By the time I joined the table, the air was already tilted. This time, though, something was different. People asked questions. One colleague stopped me in the hallway. Hey, just checking. Were you supposed to be on that call yesterday? Another sent a late-night message. If you need the notes, I saved everything. Support doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just refuses to disappear. At home, the pressure tightened. My mother called more often. Not to ask how I was, but to report. Aaron's really upset, she said one evening. He feels attacked. I exhaled slowly. Attacked by what? By you, she replied. I pictured him at the engagement party, glass raised, laughter aimed like a weapon. I didn't embarrass him, I said. I answered questions. She sighed. Why can't you let things go? Because letting things go is how they keep happening. But I didn't say that. I'd learned which truths only create more noise. The real move came 2 weeks later. I was in my office when legal forwarded me an inquiry. A concern had been raised about conflict of interest, about favoritism, about my proximity to certain funding decisions. It was framed carefully, neutral, professional, but I recognized the voice behind it. Aaron was trying to rewrite the story, to make me the problem. I sat back in my chair and laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. He'd finally done what men like him always do when power slips. He escalated without thinking. What he didn't know was that every system has a memory, and I had one too. I pulled up old files, meeting logs, approval chains, time-stamped feedback. The paper trail I'd kept not out of fear, but habit. You don't survive long as the quiet one without documentation. I forwarded everything to legal. Clean, unemotional, precise. Then I waited. The response came faster than expected. The inquiry didn't move forward. Instead, HR scheduled a formal review of leadership conduct across departments. Company-wide. I wasn't mentioned, but Aaron was. That night my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded the moment I picked up. No greeting. No pretense. I stayed silent. "I helped you," he continued, voice sharp. "I defended you. I told people you were smart, capable." I interrupted him. "You told people I was harmless." He scoffed. "You're twisting things." "No," I said. "I'm naming them." A pause. Long enough for something real to surface. "You think they'll choose you over me?" he asked quietly. There it was. Not anger. Fear. "I think," I replied evenly, "they'll choose the truth." He hung up. The next week rumors spread. That I was difficult. That I was ambitious in the wrong way. That I was changing. Funny how growth looks like betrayal to people who benefited from your silence. At a family dinner, my uncle pulled me aside. "Aaron's under a lot of pressure," he said. "You could help smooth this over." I met his gaze. "Why is it always my job to make him comfortable?" He frowned. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant." The table went quiet when we returned. Eyes darted. Conversations stalled. I sat down anyway, because I was done shrinking to preserve other people's peace. The official review began on a Monday. Interviews. Anonymous feedback. External consultants. Aaron avoided me completely. When we did cross paths, his confidence was gone, replaced by something brittle. He smiled too fast. Spoke too much. Tried too hard to seem unbothered. Systems don't respond to performance. They respond to patterns. And his pattern was finally visible. One afternoon, as I was packing up, a junior manager knocked on my door. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said nervously, "but I did. Not to watch him fall. To watch the truth stand without me holding it." Aaron arrived late. He took a seat across the table, eyes scanning the room like he was looking for an exit. When the findings were presented, no one raised their voice. No one accused. No one attacked. They didn't need to. The evidence spoke. Abuse of authority. Retaliation. Hostile work environment. Consequences followed. Formal. Immediate. As the meeting ended, people stood slowly, gathering papers, avoiding his gaze. Aaron stayed seated. For the first time in his life, there was nothing to say. I passed him on the way out. He looked up at me. Not with anger, not with pride, but with disbelief. "You planned this," he whispered. I paused. "No," I said gently. "I survived it." And I walked away, knowing something irreversible had happened. Not his downfall. My release. Because power doesn't always roar when it arrives. Sometimes it just stops apologizing. The quiet after everything settled was the strangest part. No dramatic headlines. No public scandal. Just absence. Aaron's name stopped appearing in emails. His chair stayed empty in meetings. Conversations adjusted, like a room learning new acoustics after a wall is removed. At home, the silence was louder. Family group chats slowed. Replies came late, not out of anger, out of clarity. The day I chose my dress, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She stood straighter. Her eyes didn't scan for approval. I realized something then. I hadn't just removed a person from my life. I'd removed a role. The role of the one who absorbs, who smooths, who stays quiet to keep others comfortable. At work, things changed in small but meaningful ways. People asked my opinion and waited for the answer. Meetings felt balanced. Conversations had space where there used to be noise. One evening, as I packed up, the same junior manager stopped by again. "They're launching a mentorship program," she said, smiling. "They want you to lead it." I felt something warm settle in my chest. "Are you sure?" I asked. She laughed. "Everyone is. Leadership, I was learning, isn't about dominance. It's about making room." At a family dinner weeks later, my uncle finally spoke. "You could have handled it differently," he said carefully. I met his gaze. I did handle it differently. For years. No one argued, because they remembered. Late one night, I found an old photo of Aaron and me as kids, sitting on the floor, surrounded by unfinished puzzles. I studied it longer than I should have. He wasn't born like this. Neither was I. But somewhere along the way, we learned different lessons about power. I put not because everything was perfect, but because nothing was hidden. When I said my vows, my voice didn't shake. I promised partnership, honesty, mutual becoming. And for the first time, I meant it without reservation. At the reception, laughter filled the room, but it was different from before. Warmer, unforced, real. I caught my mother watching me from across the room. Her eyes held something new, understanding. Later that night, as we stood alone, city lights stretching beyond the window, my fiancé squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said. I believed him, because I was proud of me too. Not for winning, not for exposing anyone, but for choosing myself without needing permission. Some stories end with revenge. Mine didn't. It ended with something quieter. Freedom. People ask me sometimes if I miss him. They phrase it carefully, like they're afraid of the answer, as if admitting the truth might crack something open. The honest answer is this: I don't miss the person. I miss the version of myself that thought endurance was love. That version believed staying quiet was maturity. That peace meant swallowing discomfort. That being the bigger person required becoming smaller. Letting go of that belief was harder than letting go of Aaron. Time did what it always does, it revealed what was real. Months passed. The company stabilized. The mentorship program grew beyond anything I expected. Young women, and men too, started showing up with questions they'd been afraid to ask before. About boundaries. About credit. About what to do when someone with power crosses a line. I never gave them speeches. I gave them honesty. I told them that confidence isn't loud. That documentation is not distrust. It's protection. That silence is only noble when it's chosen, not enforced. Sometimes I saw recognition flicker in their eyes. That quiet oh. At home, family gatherings slowly found a new rhythm. Aaron's name was no longer avoided, it just wasn't central. He became a footnote instead of a headline. One afternoon, my mother sat beside me on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the houses. "I didn't know how strong you were," she said softly. I smiled. Neither did I. She reached for my hand. This time there was no advice, no correction, just presence. Healing doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it comes with acceptance. I received one message from Aaron. Came nearly a year later. Short, careful. "I hope you're well." I stared at it for a long time. Then I archived it. Not because I was angry, because closure doesn't always require response. On our first anniversary, my husband and I returned to the rooftop where it had all begun. The same city lights. The same hum of voices. Different air. We stood at the railing, hands intertwined, and I felt it again, that grounded certainty. I was no longer bracing for impact. No longer rehearsing explanations. I was just here, whole. If I could speak to the woman I was that night, the one holding her glass while laughter cut too close, I would tell her this: you don't owe anyone access to you. You don't have to perform resilience to deserve respect. And you are not difficult for refusing to be diminished. The world will test you in quiet ways. It will disguise cruelty as humor, control as concern, and disrespect as tradition. Listen carefully. I simply stepped out of a role that was never meant to be permanent. And in doing so, I made room for honesty, for fairness, for myself. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about reclaiming authorship. Because when you stop letting others narrate your worth, the ending changes. Not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently. And that is more powerful than any applause.